Hello and welcome. Today we're going to make some zucchini bread. This is going to be pretty similar to the banana bread in kind of the steps, but each one is just a little bit different and kind of explain all the differences as we go. So let's get to the ingredients and get this meal started. For our ingredients, we need 3 medium eggs, 1 cup chopped walnuts, 2 1/4 cups sugar, and 3 cups of flour, 2 cups zucchini grated, 2 teaspoons vanilla, 1 teaspoon nutmeg, 1 tablespoon cinnamon, 1 cup cocoa oil, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon baking powder, and 1 teaspoon baking soda. Real quick before we get on with our recipe, I'd like to thank everyone who has subscribed and those who've been sharing the videos. It means the world to me, and being able to share these videos with you guys, it actually makes me very happy. So thank you, and if you haven't already subscribed, maybe subscribe and you'll get 1 or 2 of these a week. So let's get to cooking. Alright, starting off with our zucchini. Mine has a soft spot, so I wanted to cut that out. And additionally for this, you don't technically need to peel it, but since I had a soft spot and the zucchini didn't really look like they had been handled in the most gentle fashion at the grocery store, I decided to actually just peel them. And the reason I'm using a Y-style peeler, by the way, is it really is easier to dictate how much material you want to take off with them, because it's based on how much pressure you're applying as you drag the peeler across it. So with a very light amount of pressure, I can just take off the very, very, very outside and then come back with a paring knife to finish off any leftover bits that are on it, or any bits that needed to be taken a little deeper or something like that. Once I've got them all peeled, I'm just going to top and tail, otherwise basically just cut the ends off, and just finish up with a paring knife. Again, you can use the peels, it's not going to hurt, it's not going to do anything. I don't need them in this case, and because of all the marring and weirdness on them, I didn't know if they were going to taste alright. So I wanted to make sure they tasted good first, and that was why I made sure I got rid of all the peel. Ah yes, look, our supervisor has noticed one of the 2 black cats. We'll introduce him in a bit. He's not Cthulhu. So, once we're all done peeling and cleaning up our zucchini, we are going to need to grate it. Now in my case, I don't actually have a box grater right now, I just actually have this little thing. It works fine. Basically same thing as on yours. Go with the medium if you have the box. If you have a box, it'll probably have a small and a medium side. Go with the medium side. If you have one that has the really large side, don't use that. Definitely do not do that. These are all going to be a little bit longer than I prefer, and that's just kind of a factor of how you have to grate them, because to get them smaller than that, you would have to basically cut it up in bits and grate each individual bit, and that is not safe to do. It's also very hard and time consuming, so we don't want to do that. We're just going to grate them like you would anything else, like cheese, on a medium grater. If you have oh, hello kitten, she's just checking things out. So cute. Anyhow, thankfully she walked away and I didn't have to actually have her stop and pick her up. As I always say, you basically just want to grate them out as much as you can, and then you can take some of it and grate it a little bit on the bottom here. And then we're going to take care of the only issue that comes from this in the next step. So let's get to that. Alright, and I just noticed while editing this that my camera is a little lopsided. Okay, well, Supervisor Layla is watching us over here, and this is why I said the zucchini is most of the work in this recipe, and that's because when you grate it, you're going to typically have a little bit of extra material. They'll be a little bit longer, so you just want to pile them all up and kind of dice and chop through the whole thing, and just make sure that you get everything chopped up to a nice, even sort of, not even, but smaller. All of these would be about 1.5 inches in length if I didn't chop them up. Some being that long wouldn't be so bad, but all of them being that long, it's going to be a little bit much while you're trying to eat through the bread. And I make a mistake with the bread where I put a little too much of nuts in this one. It works fine for taste, not so much for eye candy. So, basically, chop it all up, get it in there and just slide it around. And we just want it into smaller pieces so that it'll disperse through the bread more. It'll roast a little bit more while everything's cooking. And you'll get a much wider amount. You won't get places where you don't really taste it and places where you really do. And it makes the flavor go more evenly throughout the entire bread. Alright, all the hard stuff's behind us. For the start, what we need is all of our wet ingredients and zucchini, plus our sugar. And the reason for that is we want the sugar to melt completely, dissolve, not melt, but dissolve completely into all of our fluids. And we want to whip the eggs just a tiny bit. And we also want to take this as an opportunity to incorporate air into the mixture. And that's going to make your zucchini bread lighter, fluffier, and not super, super dense. I notice a lot of recipes for zucchini bread, it gets pretty dense, like pound cake dense, and that's not really what we're going for here. What we want is something where you taste zucchini throughout, and it has a nice crumble. It should be somewhere in between the texture of like a muffin and a pound cake, or your typical like grocery store or processed version of banana bread. So, like I said, I'm just going to whip some air into this, and supervisor looks like she's thinking about leaving us for now. The reason that I'm whipping air into it is, again, this is only going to use baking soda and baking powder, and I will explain why it's, again, important to whip air into that in just a moment. So, once you get done whipping all that together, small pause before we continue. This is actually a lucky find that I had in this footage. I keep explaining that we're whipping air into it, and this is what it looks like when we come back to it after having whipped air into it for a few minutes, because I had to let it sit there for a little bit. And as you can see how much air actually floats to the top, it's enough that it looks foamy on top. And that's the foam that or the air that we're wanting to keep in there when we're folding stuff later. Alright, this last step is we just need to mix our dry ingredients into our wet. In this case, we just need to do them in a particular order. And what that's going to be is we're going to take everything except for the nuts and the flour and mix those in first. Now, that does mean that we're going to lose a tiny bit of our bubbles from our baking soda, and we make it up for that by doing some of our whisking and making sure we incorporated more in. The baking soda and the baking powder will be more activated once the baking powder is activated and releases the acid that it's encapsulated in, which will give the baking soda more fluff at that point as well. So we only lose a little bit of our baking soda, and that's what we have generally been making up for by adding more air into the mix. The reason we don't mix those last two in is we don't want the powders to cling to the nuts, so we put those in at that point once everything else is sort of mixed together. And then most importantly, we put the flour in at the very end, and we just want to stir it enough to get everything incorporated. And we're going to end up folding everything together. This is going to keep our bubbles, and it's going to make sure that our flour does not make a ton of gluten, and that way we don't get like chewy banana bread. You wouldn't want your banana bread or zucchini bread. I have banana bread on the mind. Maybe I need to make a loaf. You wouldn't want your zucchini bread to have the same texture as an Italian bread. Like, baguette would be that sort of that chewy, crusty thing. You don't want that in your zucchini bread. That would be terrible. So instead, we fold all of our ingredients together so that it makes the least amount of gluten possible. And using a spatula like this, we can just constantly also scrape the bowl into the center and just keep folding it together. We don't lose that much of the volume of air that we whipped in this way, and it works perfectly for basically making this kind of not foolproof, but it makes up for anything that we had to lose while we were mixing things together. Alright, and for the final step, we want to put it in our loaf pan. Gently as you can, kind of get it in there, as you don't want to lose your bubbles again. This is going to go into a oven preheated to 350 degrees for about 40 to 45 minutes. You want to check it at 40, and if the toothpick does not come out clean, it'll pretty much be done at 45. But just in case, check it again and give it enough time to where the toothpick comes out clean. So, as I was saying, these don't typically rise very much, and you can see there, this one rose by maybe an inch, like a very small amount. Now, two things I did that were maybe not the greatest things. The first is I had a lot of extra walnuts because the 2 bags just wasn't quite 1 cup. It was about a 1 1/4, and I used way too many walnuts. And that led to this. The sort of lumpy, crumbly texture here is actually because I put in the other 1/4 cup of walnuts. And that every time you tried to use a bread knife on it, it would end up just sort of fragmenting into bits like this. So, don't use extra walnuts. And also, if you want the clean edges on a bread like this for pictures, if you use your regular chef's knife, you can get much, much flatter edges. So just in case you do want to take pictures of your food, that can make things a lot easier, make things look a little bit better. Alright, and with that, we are completely done with zucchini bread. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. And again, if you haven't subscribed already and you enjoyed yourself, there'll be much more to come just like this. You have a great day and a great meal.